to start us off, this jackhole, Jimmy Dore, back again with the whole NATO expansion bullshit, apparently, with Finland and Sweden joining NATO brings World War III even closer. That's right. You know what the thing is? The problem with rape victims is they keep wanting to fight back. You know, if they would just lay back and take it. Hey, Jim, if they would just understand that it's hopeless. And they just need to understand that that person is bigger and tougher than they are, even if they're not. Even if the person turns out to be, I don't know, a lightweight cream puff dude in a French collared button-down shirt who you could probably knock off the top of you with a light slap. Better not even to try. This seems to be
the big reason why
this seemed to be about the Finland and the Sweden, but let's see.
There's a war happening in Ukraine is because NATO would not stop expanding towards Russia's border, which we promised we would do after.
No, we didn't.
Germany was allowed to reunify East and.
That's weird. Was let's see. Did Ukraine and Georgia and Chechnya exist after the fall of the Berlin Wall as separate autonomous sovereign countries? Anybody want to take a poke at that?
And West. So there was a promise to Russia made that we won't expand NATO.
Yeah, and then they invaded Chechnya and Georgia, and now they've invaded Ukraine twice. So fuck you.
And then we've been expanding.
We've been expanding ever since, so it's been making them
NATO
nervous.
Like crazy. And the threat of putting Ukraine, which is on Russia's border, into NATO.
So is Lithuania. So is Latvia. They're in NATO. Did they invade Belarus to keep them from joining?
NATO was part of what triggered this Ukraine war.
Yeah, part of it. That and, of course, Putin's desire to seize Ukraine, claim it for Russia, wipe out the Ukrainian people in a massive genocide, and then moved on to Moldova, and then into Poland, and then fucking all of Europe. What?
We have been provoking the Ukraine war, just so you know.
Just so you know, we've been provoking the Ukraine war. Not the country that attacked the fucking place. We have been provoking it.
And so now it seems like we're going to keep doing it. We're going to.
Oh, are we? I didn't realize Jimmy and I lived in Finland and Sweden.
Keep provoking a war with a nuclear power.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They've got nukes, so you got to kind of let them shovel people into mass graves and send rape squads into a country and destroy their entire infrastructure. They've got nukes. I mean, they might use the nukes. Now, granted, they've done more damage so far than a nuke would do. But, you know, never mind that.
And this is from the New York Times.
Oh, okay. I thought we weren't supposed to trust the corporate media because they're always lying to us. It's all they do. No. When it serves you, it's fine to sort. Okay.
It says NATO
fine to use as a source.
Leaders say they will speed Finland and Sweden membership bids.
Yeah, so Finland and Sweden are bidding to join. They are asking to join NATO. We're not expanding NATO. Sweden and Finland, who were holdouts, decided, fuck this. If we're not in NATO, that's an open invitation for Russia to invade us at some point. Fuck that.
That's what they say.
That's what they say.
The head of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that's NATO, said Sunday that the security bloc would grant fast-track membership to Sweden and Finland, raising pressures on Putin, who justified his invasion of Ukraine by what he cast as the need to keep the military alliance away from Russia's borders. President Putin wants Ukraine defeated, NATO down, North America and Europe divided, said NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in Berlin after meeting foreign ministers. But Ukraine stands. NATO is stronger than ever. Europe and North America are solidly united. Okay.
All true.
Both countries said their applications were imminent to NATO.
Yes, they're applying to NATO. Yes, we're all capable of reading. We understand that, by the way, that NATO is not expanding. Other countries, sovereign countries, with every fucking right to do so, have asked bid, that's what the bid part means, applied. That's why an application to fucking join NATO, because they weren't before, just like Ukraine wasn't before. And Russia went, well, if you're not NATO, I might as well fucking roll through.
Finland's parliament is expected to ratify a NATO application on Monday.
This is going to be the tough part of the article for Jimmy. This is going to be a tough one. You can read ahead to see why.
That's today. And Sweden's governing Social Democratic Party said Sunday that it would vote in favor of joining NATO, all but guaranteeing that the Nordic nation would end 200 years of neutrality.
Why is he using vocal inflection as if this proves a point simply in reading what's occurring? And why is he like, huh? What is that? What the fuck?
The possibility.
All right, now he's just going to read us a fucking article. Is that what this is?
Of NATO troops deploying along Russia's 810-mile border with Finland comes as Mr. Putin is facing notable setbacks in the war he began in Ukraine nearly 3 months ago. I don't think that's true, New York Times.
What? What, that he began the war? What the possibility of NATO troops deploying along Russia's 810-mile border with Finland comes as Mr. Putin is facing notable setbacks in the war he began in Ukraine nearly 3 months ago. What? You don't think there's notable setbacks? Holy shit. Honestly. Right. What?
Ukraine forces have advanced to...
No, Ukrainian forces. Also, no, answer that part. What do you mean? What part of the top part of that isn't true? Hold on. Sorry, this slid over here. I apologize. Beep. There we go. What part of what he read this first part up to nearly 3 months ago and said, I don't believe that's true. What part of that? What are you skipping over there? You don't think Russia's fucking up massively? That they've lost a third of their fucking professional soldiers in this battle so far. They went for Kiev, they fucking blew it. The Ukrainians have already pushed back in the north to the Russian border. They're not going to stop until Crimea, Donbass, all those areas are broomed the fuck out. And they have no reason to.
Near the Russian border in recent days after pushing Russian troops from the outskirts of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city.
Which, by the way, is a sister city, curiously enough, of my birthplace, Cincinnati, Ohio. That's weird. I did not know that till recently.
Many Russians believe the war is no longer against Ukraine, but has morphed into a proxy conflict with the United States and NATO. You think?
Well, that's all they're hearing from the Russian media and you, Jimmy.
Who, they say, are exploiting the conflict to destroy their nation, according to interviews with a half dozen residents in Moscow and the provincial Siberia.
And in provincial Siberia, where they have no access to Western media or any other source except for state media.
Also, anybody who knows anything about anything will tell you that.
No. Every point Jimmy makes about this gets dumber the more he talks.
The decision of Finland and Sweden to apply to join NATO has only played into the siege narrative pushed by the Kremlin, tapping into patriotic feelings in a nation that prides itself on coming together to repel foreign threats over centuries.
So what? That doesn't mean they have the right to do it, and it doesn't mean that Finland and Sweden have to worry about the hurt feelings of Russia and the siege mentality. That siege mentality already exists. They already attacked a sovereign country.
John Pilger says, this week, 15,000 U.S.-led troops will simulate a NATO war with Russia less than 100 miles from
U.S.-led troops.
From St. Petersburg. Imagine the same provocation 100 miles from nuclear-armed Washington. And here's what I like.
Well, if Washington if we'd invaded Mexico and said we have to erase the idea that there is a Mexico and Mexican identity, which was laid there by the Spanish. We believe that we have Spanish-speaking people in Arizona and in Texas and in Nevada and California, throughout the country, but specifically in those areas. And they have family in Mexico. So we think we have the right to fuck this border between us and Mexico. They keep pushing back anyways. And we need to attack to keep these immigrants out. We can attack Mexico and bomb the living fuck out of every city in Mexico. If we did that, then I'm guessing Latin America might start doing military exercises because the idea is, why would we stop there?
Our friend Nick Cruz says, according to the West, Russia is struggling in Ukraine as the military is exposed as weak and ineffective.
Right.
But Sweden and Finland must join NATO to stop the giant Russian threat from taking over Europe. People are so propagandized, they don't realize how this makes no sense.
Okay, first of all, these are not mutually exclusive ideas. Russia has an enormous military. They're just misusing it in this particular situation. If they decided to go all out, they believe in sort of claim to heritage sites in Ukraine. So there are areas in Ukraine where there was the birth of the Russian people, the birth of the Russian society. They don't have those, so they're, in theory, holding back a little to not devastate those areas and just sending in soldiers so that they can take these cities. They want Kharkiv, they don't want to wipe it out. Mariupol, they can flatten and then they'll just rebuild. It's a port area. They're really just using it for industrial purposes. But Kharkiv and Kiev and these other cities, they think are you know, the buildings, the churches, the original Soviet buildings are important to their national identity. None of that is true about Finland and Sweden. Sweden and Finland, they don't give a rat fuck about, and they could just decimate and turn into farmland.
So that's
stupid.
Aaron, let me bring in Aaron Mate, award.
Oh, great! I thought we weren't going to get any dumber in this episode, and yet
Winning anti-war journalist who
no, he's not anti-war. He just is. He's rooting for the Russians.
can be found at mate.substack.com.
Okay, so it's a money-making endeavor. I see.
Aaron, what's your response to this latest NATO move?
Nick Cruz has it exactly right. On the one hand, we're supposed to believe, which is true actually, that Russia has had a hard time in Ukraine. They have. But
no, they haven't, Aaron. Jimmy read that earlier, and he disagrees with the New York Times, so I'm sure he's going to interrupt you right now and call out your bullshit.
yet also, Russia is then poised to take over the rest of Europe, and that's why Finland and Sweden need to join NATO. Look, Jimmy, this is a crazy time. We talked about earlier, every member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus is voting in lockstep with the neocons and approving billions of dollars more for a proxy war that will primarily benefit.
No, it's an interesting nose touch right then, which is a awareness that you're lying, that whole idea, when people do that. What? Judd, I'm working. Can you guys hear my cat outside the door? What? Hold on. I can't. Hold on. This is. Wait 1 second. What? What? What is it? What? What's going on? Oh my gosh. Yeah, what? What? She's just yammering outside the door. It's so funny. And she was sitting with Murph. Murph was right next to her. He's like, she's tough. I know. It's okay. I'm working. Okay. All right. She was sitting out there with Murphy, who's normally the noisy one. That's it. No, we can't see Chud right now. She walked back towards the steps when I got out there. So anyways, all right. All right, we're back to this bullshit. Give me a second.
The weapons industry and primarily arm neo-Nazis inside Ukraine.
Yeah, primarily, listen to that fucking sentence for a second. Primarily arm neo-Nazis in that country. The Progressive Caucus, the Swedes, the Social Democrats of fucking Finland, the European Union, they're all getting together just because of this innate desire to back neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Do these fuckers talk about being so propagandized they can't think straight?
Because that's who will get these weapons, at least
No, they fucking won't.
some of them.
At least, wait a minute. Primarily armed neo-Nazis that will get these weapons, at least some of them. At least some of the weapons, or at least some of the neo-Nazis? Are you counting the ones that died, the Azov battalion members that died holding the steel factory?
And
Again, with the fucking French cuffs, too. What is that fixation? I don't get it. Is this just some nouveau riche bullshit?
now we have Finland and Sweden, which have prospered under neutrality. It's been great for them as far as
Yeah, but Ukraine prospered a little bit when they thought everything was fine from from 2019 till now, but then magically,
I know, unless someone wants to argue otherwise, deciding to abandon all of that for the sake of what? Just further provoking Russia. And this means that every society is going to get worse. Russia will get worse because this will require Russia to spend even more on its military. Russia's military budget is about 8% of the rest of NATO's, about 8%. So now Russia is going to be increasingly militarized. That's bad for the Russian people because militarization is bad for everybody.
well, tell this to Putin. Why is militarization bad for everybody? A lot of, by the way, all I would say, all of the technology that Jimmy uses to contact Aaron Mate and that Aaron Mate uses to contact Jimmy to be on his fucking show, all of it, from the lenses in phones and the software used for the intranet that turned into the internet, all of that stuff, military financing, baby.
Especially those who have to live under it.
Under the military stuff? Oh, well then, you know, it would be really good if Russia just decided to stop their violent expansionism and drop their attacks on other countries. And maybe you could stop talking like an asshole that anybody that holds up their shield is the same as stabbing someone with a sword.
And it means that all these other societies are going to spend more on weapons too, because that's what NATO membership requires, is that you basically hand over your national budget to the arms manufacturers.
No, it doesn't. It's 2% of your GDP towards defense. And it doesn't even have to be like missiles and shit. You can define what that means for you. If you don't make tanks, you don't have to buy tanks necessarily. If you go, we got all this land. We're basically an island. We need boats. They're not going to make you have tanks just for the fuck of it.
Especially arms manufacturers in the United States. So this is a disaster, and for what?
No, not especially. As a matter of fact, the howitzers that just got sent to the front, the drone manufacturer that they primarily used until they got the kamikaze drones, that's BAE. That's a British arms manufacturer.
And it could actually mean that we have new fronts, because what is Russia going to do? Russia's already threatened that it might take measures in response to Finland joining NATO, because Finland is on its borders. So, and what that could mean is Russia taking out military sites inside Finland before it joins NATO, because after it joins NATO, if it attacks Finland, that means
I never thought of that.
war.
You never thought of that? Yeah, that's why they're in a hurry to join, asshole, because Ukraine couldn't join and Russia knew they wanted to join to protect themselves, because once they're in NATO, Russia doesn't dare fuck with them lest they get the entire pressure of NATO upon them. It's a defensive treaty organization, by the way. And to keep Ukraine from doing it, they invaded Donbass and Crimea. That was the fucking purpose. To constantly keep that fight going, because you can't join NATO if you have a border dispute. They did the same thing in Moldova. They have breakaway groups on the border of Ukraine and Moldova simply so that they could zero out the chance that both of those countries join NATO. Moldova's not on their fucking border. Christ, look at these dipshits just reaching down into the neo-Nazi barrel after everything. We know they've seen this shit. Now, I don't know if they watch the reports coming back of dead Ukrainians and go, well, there's a couple Nazis that deserved it. There's a Nazi old lady. There's a bunch of Nazi kids. And the stories about the children with their genitals mutilated and stuff, it's all propaganda put forward by the Nazis because Russia's feeling really scared. I don't know what the fuck, how they read this stuff and still stick to this bullshit.
So this is just a disaster. And for what? It's basically because Europe has subordinated its security to the U.S.
No, it's because their security is threatened by Russia in a new way. They haven't subordinated, like, Turkey and Hungary have to be part of the negotiations about whether or not they join. The UK is arguing for the entrance of Ukraine specifically, as we are. I mean, we're welcoming it, but we're not forcing it. That was the thing. And again, these assholes want to blow off the 97 NATO-Russia agreement that said that these countries are all sovereign and can determine their own defense. Period. End of story.
Instead of trying to come up with what was the vision of Mikhail Gorbachev and German leaders, not the current one, but past ones, and other European leaders, for a common European security infrastructure.
What do you think NATO is, dumb fuck?
Which everybody's interests were acknowledged.
Yeah, the problem is Russia's interests are, we're going to take Ukraine and wipe out the Ukrainian people, and Moldova's next. P.S. Poland should be ours as well. It was part of the Belarusian period anyways. And you know what? Fuck Finland. We should have never lost that to the goddamn Swedish Vikings. That's basic. Finland's basically Russian land taken by the Swedes. That's the culture of Finland in the minds of Vladimir Putin.
And not creating a U.S.-led hostile military alliance that by definition treats anyone who's not inside of it as an enemy.
That's not fucking true. If that was true, we wouldn't be helping Ukraine. The NATO alliance isn't hostile towards anyone who isn't in NATO. It's an arm lock. This is just fucking done.
So when you have a hostile military alliance expanding increasingly to
It's not. It's a defensive alliance.
Russia's borders, it's a disaster. And this, unlike, Iraq or Libya or other targets of U.S. regime change wars, Russia can fight back. It has nuclear weapons. So ultimately what all these moves are doing.
Again, this is one of those things like, he's got a gun, just lay back and take it. That's the entire argument. They've got nukes. So anything short of nuclear war, you just let them do it because, they might launch the nukes. They can use all the strategic and tactical warfare they want, all the conventional warfare they want, as long as they don't use nukes. And so for under the envelope of mutual assured destruction, instead of both sides acting as within the rule of law, having nukes gives Russia the ability to carry out conventional warfare anywhere it fucking wants.
It's just bringing us closer to the unthinkable, which is nuclear war. It's just crazy.
Here's what Steve Schmidt, the genius who brought you John McCain and Sarah Palin, had to say. Steve Schmidt said, Finland and Sweden joining NATO is a momentous event. In an instant,
By the way, didn't Steve Schmidt have a huge blow up at the McCain campaign because he didn't want Sarah Palin? But never mind.
Powerful military alliance in world history has been made even stronger. These modern, free, powerful, pluralistic Arctic powers should be celebrated.
Yeah, he's talking specifically about Sweden and Finland making a choice to join NATO of their own free will and accord, and that these are pluralistic societies with freedom inside them, and that would be in danger if Russia had its way. And Jimmy is defending the pro-Putin methodology: freeze the internet, only allow state-sponsored. I mean, there is a certain. If you really think about it, YouTube is technically not turned off in Russia. They just limit what can be seen through the internet there. So they only let some stuff through. There is no question that if you're in Russia, you can see Jimmy Dore's show on YouTube, on the internet. I guarantee you can't see mine. Just for the record. So Jimmy has nothing to lose by filleting Vladimir Putin like this. And it's not like he's getting a big bump in super chats from, Finland and Sweden because he's shitting on social democrats.
It's
what? They're choosing to join because of their concern about the actions of Russia, not because of pressure from the United States. We didn't approach them about it. We didn't force them to do it. We didn't say, fuck you if Russia invades you. We're helping Ukraine, but you guys are on your fucking own. We didn't do any of that shit.
This guy, again, has been braced by the Democratic Party now because he's anti-Trump. So a maniac like
Right. He came around, and even though he's a conservative, he's a balanced conservative. And the idea is that you should be able to talk to people you politically disagree with without demonizing them horribly, especially if they have a mea culpa. So especially if they ever recognize that they were wrong and go, I was wrong to think that this was going to be okay, or that this was, that this was the only steps they said it would be.
that who brought you Sarah Palin and John McCain and is now pushing for World War III. He's considered a sage by people at MSNBC and people who voted for Joe Biden. He's considered...
No, he's considered representative of a balanced group of conservatives. That's why they bring people on. Most news organizations bring on the members of the other side. Fox famously having Alan Combs on as which is obviously the look that Jimmy's going for with the French cuffs. But they all bring on somebody that's supposedly from across the aisle that they can have a conversation with, or to intentionally create incendiary crossfire kind of conversations with. In this particular instance, Schmidt came over to the MSNBC side because he saw the light under Trump that this is where this shit was headed.
A truth-telling sage because he doesn't like Trump.
And Jimmy does. Jimmy's a big fan of Trump. Yeah, and ultimately he's pro-democracy. That's right. That not Jimmy. Jimmy fucking hates democracy. Steve Schmidt likes democracy. He has a mind losing fair and square in the marketplace of ideas, at least theoretically, according to what he says. I don't know the man personally. I've met him once at Politicon a few years ago, a couple years before COVID, but I've never had a sit down talk with him ever. But from what you see on his interviews and the like, the idea is that he still stands allegedly for, his belief in conservative ideas, but it doesn't include the more extreme radical bullshit versions of things, which Jimmy only speaks extreme radical bullshit, so he wouldn't understand.
There's another one. I don't know who this guy is. He says Putin on Finland and Sweden joining NATO. This is what Putin says. Russia has no problem with those states, meaning Finland and Sweden. So there is no direct threat from expansion to those countries, meaning he doesn't mind if NATO expands.
Right. Fuck. I can't even believe this asshole is bringing this up. I literally referenced this quote from Vladimir Putin yesterday when this shit first came out. And Jimmy's like, he had to do this because of NATO expansion. This is all NATO expansion. And fucking Aaron Mate's like, Sweden and Finland are pushing us closer to World War III. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin his fucking self said Russia has no problem with those states. So there's no direct threat from expansion to those countries. He doesn't care if they join NATO. He doesn't care he says this. He doesn't care if Finland joins NATO. He doesn't care if Sweden joins NATO. For two reasons. One, he knows that if they decided to just go for it with Finland, even though Finland's not in NATO, they know it's World War III. That's just so fucked up. They think they have a tacit relationship with Ukraine the way they do with Chechnya and Georgia and other states where they're kind of allowed to muck around because they're former Soviet states. But Finland's off limits. So the NATO expansion narrative is bullshit. He even says so. There's a bigger border of Finland than there is of Ukraine with Russia. If he doesn't give a fuck about Finland joining NATO, why the fuck would it matter if Ukraine did? It's the same border. It's the eastern side of the country.
But deploying military infrastructure will provoke a response based on...
NATO doesn't have to deploy infrastructure. Finland's got a giant military. They already put 2% more of their, more than 2% of GDP towards their defense because they've got a giant border with Russia.
On the threats they create for us. So you can...
So he's worried about, anti-ballistic missile systems from NATO being gifted basically them so that Russian nukes can't reach other places. But joining NATO kind of doesn't give a fuck.
Let them join your group, your NATO.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't care. So your whole conversation with Aaron Mate, that whole thing is fucking garbage.
But don't put any military installations in their countries because then we're going to take them out.
No, that's not what he says. He says that deploying military infrastructure will provoke a response based on the threats they create for us. Well, if they put an anti-ballistic missile system there, what threat does that create? Because that's primarily what they've been bitching about with NATO. And what does an anti-ballistic missile system do? Is it ballistic missiles? Does it launch ballistic missiles? No, it shoots them the fuck down. The problem Russia has had since the mid-90s with NATO is the ABM systems. America and the UK and to some degree French defense contractors and now of course Israel has a variation of this, have anti-ballistic missile systems that they have so that if they were ever fired upon, they could launch these anti-ballistic missile targeting systems and knock out these missiles before they strike major cities and the like. That's the idea. That's why the building of hypersonic missiles, by the way, which fly at a normal speed and then fly straight down hypersonic. That they were hoping to get around the ABM systems. They won't, but that's the theory. The problem that Russia has had is that you can't use mutual assured destruction as this envelope that allows you to fuck any country you want because everybody's afraid you're going to nuke them if there's an anti-ballistic missile system in all of these border states that can knock your nukes out of the air. So people to go, I don't have to worry about you firing a nuke at me. We'll knock them out of the air. But you can't just attack these people.
But Jimmy, that's the problem.
No, Ukraine is not a part of NATO right now because Russia invaded their border region after 2014 as they started to normalize relations with Europe to keep them from being able to join NATO, because you can't join NATO if you have a border dispute.
Once you're in NATO,
You have to.
you're bound.
You're bound.
To the military alliance, including.
So what? That's exactly right. And so is everyone else, fucko. Of course, this is coming from people who have zero friends. Let me make this abundantly clear. Aaron Monte, Jimmy Dore have no friends. They have acquaintances that are in the same political circles. They have zero fucking friends. None. Think of all the people that used to be on Jimmy's show, Ron Placone and you know, the rotating few that he has on there. And then now the only people in Jimmy's life are the saps he can put on a screen right here and hide behind the graphic until he decides to pull them up because he's run out of shit to say.
Including, you're also bound to join a war. So if the U.S. gets
right, no, you're not. You're not bound to join a war. If any of the NATO countries are attacked, you're bound to defend them together. That's why it's an alliance.
Into a war with Russia, then Finland and Sweden are bound.
No, they don't. NATO does. If the United States does a preemptive attack on Russia, according to the NATO alliance, you do not have to join them in that. That is just a flat out fucking lie. If Russia attacks the United States or bombs Poland or France or Lithuania or Latvia, or now Sweden and Finland once they join, or any of the other countries, then the rest of the countries have to come to their defense. Fuck.
Legally to fight on the U.S. side.
That's just garbage. No, it isn't true. That is just flat out a lie.
That's the danger of it. So yeah, sure. And look, what Putin is talking about there is a part of the major background to the Ukraine crisis. The Ukraine war is not just about Ukraine. It's also about, for the last 20 years, the U.S. in a move that was essentially engineered by John Bolton. So again, this is
garbage. Hold on one second. Let me bring something up if I could. Just in case anybody hasn't seen this before. Here's the part where their whole fucking thing falls apart because they're dummies. Ladies and gentlemen, the Founding Act on Mutual Relations, Cooperation, and Security between NATO and the Russian Federation, signed in Paris, France, last updated, this article, in 2009, 27th of May, 1997. So the written, signed off on, not conversations during the fucking fall of the wall in Berlin. We won't promise, there was a phone call, none of that. The written, agreed upon, founding agreement between Russia and NATO, signed by both the NATO organization and Russia as a country in 1997, NATO and Russia do not consider each other adversaries. They share the goal of overcoming the vestiges of early confrontation and competition, strengthening mutual trust and cooperation. Blah, blah, blah. There's like a whole thing. NATO has undertaken a historic transformation process that will continue. In 91, the alliance revised its strategic doctrine to take account of the new security environment in Europe. Blah, blah, blah. So here's the principles. Proceeding from the principle that the security of all states in the Euro-Atlantic community is indivisible, meaning that all the states, including... and at this point, Ukraine did exist. Ukraine, Finland, Sweden, all the states that weren't technically in NATO were indivisible. NATO and Russia will work together to contribute to the establishment in Europe of common and comprehensive security based on the allegiance of shared values, commitments, and norms of behavior in the interest of all states. NATO and Russia will help strengthen the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, including developing further its role as a primary instrument in preventative diplomacy, conflict prevention, crisis management, post-conflict rehabilitation, and regional security cooperation. This is the agreement that NATO approached Russia with. Russia agreed and signed on to. Okay, now, to achieve the aims of this act, and I can't believe that these fuckers have talked about this long without ever knowing this. Right? That they don't know about, like, they've never bothered. Like, I think Aaron Mate has to know. He has to. Jimmy's a fucking moron, so he clearly, no one's even presented this to him. This is, he's dumb on purpose. He's still pushing the 9 neo-Nazis in pre-2014 in the Azov battalion before it was absorbed into the National Guard as part of as they started brooming the Russians and the sock puppets out of the fucking country over the last 6 years, 8 years now. Here it is. This is Russia and NATO signed this in 97. I don't want to hear about fucking somebody, Casper Weinberger made a fucking phone call to Gorbachev in the middle of the night and whispered sweet nothings to him. This is what they fucking signed. To achieve the aims of this act, NATO and Russia will base their relations on a shared commitment to the following principles. Development on the basis of transparency, of a strong, stable, enduring, and equal partnership of cooperation to strengthen security and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area. Russia would later go on, shortly after this, to invade Georgia, invade Chechnya, be involved in paramilitary actions inside Chechnya and in other countries. Acknowledgement of the vital role that diplomacy, political pluralism, the rule of law, and respect for human rights and civil liberties, and the development of free market economies played in the development of common prosperity and comprehensive security. So no massive oligarchical kleptocracy. You promise? We promise. Okay. Refrain from the threat or use of force against each other, as well as any other state in its sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence in any manner inconsistent with the United Nations Charter and the Declaration of Principles guiding relations between participating states contained in the Helsinki Final Act. Here it is. Now, this is the part that really stands out and punches a giant fucking hole in their stupid argument about this. NATO expansion. Respect for sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all states and their inherent right to choose the means to ensure their own security. The inviolability of borders and people's rights of self-determination as enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and other OSCE documents. If Finland and Sweden and Ukraine and Chechnya and Georgia want to join NATO, they can join NATO. If they don't want to join NATO and they just want to fight off all comers by themselves, they have every fucking right to. NATO signed this. Russia signed this in 1997. I don't want to hear any of this dippy bullshit. This is so, we've covered this a bunch of times, and these assholes never seem to shake this nonsense. And I have a real hard time thinking they haven't seen this shit. So they just must be lying their ass off, assuming that their viewers, I know there's some Jimmy Dore viewers in here. Have you motherfuckers has he ever brought this up? Oh, you think Putin cares about that agreement? I know he doesn't. But that's not the point. They're arguing that Putin has a right to invade Ukraine because somebody, whispered in his ear that we wouldn't expand NATO into countries that didn't even fucking exist yet in 1991.
Anybody on board with this is doing John Bolton's bidding.
Which is garbage.
Dismantling arms control treaty. Bolton under Bush dismantled the Anti-ballistic missile treaty, the ABM.
Right.
And the official pretext.
When was that? When? After the attack on Georgia? After Chechnya? You see where this goes?
Text was that we need to do this to protect Europe from Iranian missiles, which is a complete joke. I don't even think Iranian missiles could hit Europe. And if they
Well, they can't now, but they could one day. And back then, they were closer to it than they were after the Obama administration created a deal, which you guys were like, well, I don't know, if Trump gets in, who gives a fuck? The whole country's fucked anyways.
could, Iran launching missiles at Europe would mean Iran's destruction. So
Yes.
that's a scam. The real reason.
Yeah, but there's a difference between, and a different concern of, the sort of strategic desires of a country that wants to seize territory and a Hail Mary by a doomsday cult that might run the country at one particular point. And the fear with the Iranian mullahs was, if we can't have the world, no one can.
Reason is to free up the U.S. to build offensive military sites, which they've done in Poland and Romania, that can be aimed at Russia, which is the background. And then on top of that, under Trump,
You don't aim anti-ballistic missiles. You stop missiles from coming out. Again, this is wholly backwards.
when John Bolton came back, he pulled the U.S. out of the INF Treaty, which had eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. So now Bolton doing that with Trump's support allows the U.S. and Russia to build up more nuclear.
Yeah, but you guys said that voting for Hillary Clinton would be the problem. She wouldn't have pulled us out of that, as a matter of fact, which is speaks to the kind of stabilization activities that the Biden administration tried to do as soon as they came back in, before all this bullshit started.
Weapons that had previously been taken offline. Trump also killed the Open Skies Treaty, which allows the U.S. and Russia to patrol each other's territory to ensure that they're not building up these kinds of.
Yeah, he destroyed it so that we couldn't watch Russian troops come into Ukraine. That's why he ended it.
Scary weapons. And so
Scary weapons, as opposed to the ones that have, like cat ears on them, like manga characters.
Russia, before the invasion of Ukraine, was not just trying to put proposals on the table that could resolve the Ukraine crisis,
Namely, let us keep all of Crimea, Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk, and if we decide to salami slice more of it later, we will.
the Minsk Accords.
The Minsk Accords, the gun-to-the-head agreement before Zelensky was elected president, and now he might go, you know what, there's no particular reason why, they're not honoring their side of it, so somehow we have to keep doing it, because why? Oh, because they have nukes.
Which was the peace settlement that everyone supposedly supported, and Russia was trying to get that enforced. But also Russia.
Okay, let's look into that for 1 second, because it's a bunch of shit. Oh, I've got to get out of here. I thought, like, one sec. Let me hop back. Let's see. Chat the mouse. This is 2020. Okay, let's. Okay. Where's the. Here you go. Okay, here we go. Minsk I Agreement. This is the context in which the first Minsk Agreement was signed in the capital of Belarus on 5th of September 2014. Remember, this is when Yanukovych is running things. I think he loses he lost, and he's basically skipping town during this period. October, I think, is when he actually left. Echoing Poroshenko's earlier peace plan, it called for the following measures. The OSCE monitored ceasefire, an exchange of prisoners, the withdrawal of armed formations, military equipment, and fighters and mercenaries from Ukraine. They never did that. The establishment of an OSCE monitored security zone along the border, an economic reconstruction program for Donbass. Never happened. The Russians kept Donbass and they kept fighting. A memorandum on the 19th December repeated the demand for a ceasefire, withdrawal of heavy weapons. It proposed banning landmines and drones, except OSCE drones, to watch, and reiterated the call for foreign troops to be withdrawn. This was also a first attempt to delineate the line of contact. Yet the humiliation of Ilyevsk ended Poroshenko's hopes of setting the terms of the political settlement. With his administration reeling, 3 clauses were inserted into Minsk I at Russia's insistence. 1. The adoption of a law on special status that would temporarily decentralize power to occupy Donbass, meaning that they would have their own mini government that Russia could fill with Russians. That's what, I mean, basically what they were doing with Kiev for years. They wanted a little satellite version of that in Donbass that they could grow, and then they could start expanding, and then through referendum seize half the country. That was the thing. Then it went too slowly and it didn't work because the Ukrainians themselves were like, fuck this nonsense. On the basis, the holding of local elections and an inclusive nationwide dialogue. These provisions stopped short of a constitutional change, but did recast the debate. The political clause of Poroshenko's peace plan envisioned that the abnormal situation in Donbass be rapidly brought back to normal. Minsk I provided the existing abnormal situation be regulated and prolonged, albeit temporarily. Instead of being dissolved, the DNR and LNR would now be elements of a future political settlement. And that, what was the end of that? How did that roll out? The DNR and LNR. Russia declared them autonomous regions before they attacked. The result of this, of them signing this shit when Poroshenko was on his heels, was that, all right, we'll deal with this later. Well, how was it dealt with later? The Russians used it as a pretext to attack and to stage weapons inside Ukraine. In line with Minsk I, the Verkhovna Rada passed a temporary law on special status on September, signed on 16 October by Poroshenko. It was to be enforced for 3 years and extended annually after that. It was, and by the way, 2014, 15, 16, 17, got extended 1 more year. Zelensky gets in, doesn't extend it. The announcement of a ceasefire, they renegotiated in 2020 effectively, or they started to anyways. The announcement of ceasefire had little effect. As fighting continued, Russia bolstered DNR, LNR regimes to make them invulnerable to renewed pressure from Ukraine, and thus avoid a repetition of the summer crisis. The establishment of more authentic proto-states required several measures. The reorganization of regional militias into more disciplined and armed forces, meaning the little green men were turned into actual Russian BTGs, and police units. All the police stations, all the police forces were then afterwards aligned with Russia. DNR leaders by locals, the establishment of public order, sometimes by physically eliminating recalcitrant warlords. Recalcitrant warlords. Ukrainians who didn't want to give up being Ukrainian after they'd been invaded. And the delivery of basic public services by the DNR, LNR authorities as they started to grease the wheels with the Russians locally and start feeding people in there. So the Minsk Accord was effectively a gun-to-the-head agreement that Ukraine was forced into in 2014 that had a 3-year timetable and then was re-upped until Zelensky came into power. And then all of a sudden,
Russia put out these draft treaties to both the U.S. and NATO that called for these issues to be addressed, that called for ending the position of offensive weaponry on both sides. So Russia was saying that we will take away our offensive weaponry aimed at your territory if you take it away aimed at ours.
No, not aimed at your territory, aimed at the territory of ours, of yours that we have claimed. Again, if this was imagine if this was England saying, well, we can wipe out the Cherokee, the Cohitok, the Choctaw, the Comanche, the Pawnee, the Lakotas, and everybody, because we on the eastern side of the country, it's mostly English speakers and their Quaker religion is very close to our religion, which it isn't. But you know what I'm saying? These guys would be okay with that.
And essentially, all this was dismissed. The U.S.
Right, because they weren't. It was none of it was a promise that they wouldn't do it more in the future, and they kept fighting.
Did not want to seriously negotiate. The U.S. said that there was some room for discussion on some marginal issues, but not on the core issues. And that's
the core issues, which is giving up Ukrainian territory to Russia, like happened in Georgia, like happened in Chechnya. They now control farmland for Chechen and Georgian citizens under duress from the Russian government, which they shouldn't have the right to do. And again, this is, to use an analogy these fuckers allegedly care about, the Georgian farmers in this situation are the Palestinians. You get me? And the Russians are the Israelis in this situation. For all the complaints that are up there, that's exactly it's nearly a one-to-one analogy. They can just fucking kill these people or disappear them because they claimed the territory and they say it's theirs.
a major part of the background to the Ukraine crisis. And now it's escalating to this point where instead of trying to...
And by the way, look at Jimmy listening to Aaron Mate like he's learning something. And he's been talking about this shit for 2 months and change now.
Address these concerns and engaging in serious diplomacy. The U.S. and its allies are doubling down by expanding NATO and creating...
No, they're not. Other countries are joining because they see Russia as a threat. We didn't call fucking Finland and Sweden and say, hey, join. They went, holy fuck, Russia's just decided that it's in their strategic interest to seize territory.
The threat of even more conflict.
And
yeah, recalcitrant warlords has brain hooks, absolutely, along Chatloy as language.
Let's listen to Noam Chomsky tell us what's the real point of NATO now. Since the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990.
By the way, Noam Chomsky said voting for third parties in the election against Trump is madness and idiotic, and Jimmy shit all over him for it.
Now, what is the point of it? And here's what he says.
The question that we ought to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, I've seen Noam Chomsky lately. That's not what he looks like. This is old. This is before current day, before Russia invaded. Let's see if, and I don't, we'll find out.
Is why did NATO even exist after 1990? Throughout the whole history of the Cold War.
Because Russia still had nukes, and though they were allegedly aligning, they were still run by ex-KGB people.
We were told NATO is necessary to defend Western Europe from the Russian hordes, okay?
I don't think they use the words hordes, but I'd have to talk to a linguistics professor to know if that mattered.
No more Russian hordes. What happens to NATO? It expands, okay?
Obviously, your battery is running low. You might want to plug in your PC. Okay.
It expands to the east. Its mission changed. Its official mission now is not to defend Europe from the Russian hordes. It's to control the global energy system, sea lanes and pipelines, and to serve as a U.S.-run intervention force. Well, you know, we're all educated intellectuals. We can now ask a question. What was the nature of the propaganda we were fed all those years? I mean, if NATO was there to defend the West from the Russians, why is it now expanding right to the borders of Russia, becoming a global U.S. intervention force, protecting sea lanes and pipelines?
Because it's one of the weapons of war in modern times is control of energy. And as we have seen in energy being not available right now because of Russian oil and gas being taken out of the equation or lowered refinery capacity due to COVID and coming back online, that millions of people can starve if somebody chokes the fucking energy sector, especially if they do it as a malign actor. Not just somebody saying, we're not going to sell to you or we're not going to make it anymore, but somebody blowing up fucking ships or pipelines is a geopolitical attack that could result in millions of deaths, billions of people dying from starvation worldwide. That's why.
So on. What that tells us is all the talk about the Cold War was just a pure lie.
No, it isn't. That's silly.
And there's plenty more evidence for that, which we could go into. Educated intellectuals don't pursue this line of thought, but it's a pretty obvious one.
Educated intellectuals don't go into it because the more you think about it, the more ridiculous it is.
Well, going on to Ukraine, Mearsheimer's point is that...
And by the way, Mearsheimer is the guy that Jimmy cites all the time. Mearsheimer is a fucking asshole. He is the Ray Dalio of Russia.
For any Russian leader, whoever it might be, Mahatma Gandhi, Ukraine is right at the core of their geostrategic concerns. For Ukraine to be taken into NATO, which is what is repeatedly threatened, would be a very serious threat to Russian security.
Why? Again, this goes to like Lithuania and Latvia are in there. Didn't cause any sweat. Apparently, Finland joins. Nobody gives a rat fuck. The only problem with Ukraine joining is they can't take it. And they're planning on taking it. And they later on, because, let's see, hold on. Let me, hold on. Let's see. Hold on. This is Noam Chomsky today. That's Noam Chomsky. That's Noam Chomsky. That's Noam Chomsky. Do you think anything happened geopolitically? And this doesn't even make Chomsky wrong necessarily in his assessment early on, because he might have just been fundamentally naive about the threat of Russia at the time because Russia was playing nice. It's like people who were clamoring about China's ascendancy before they really realized what the CCP was up to. Do you think anything happened between this Noam Chomsky and this Noam Chomsky, for fuck's sake? At this point, like, Putin wasn't even on his second presidency. Again, this just makes, Noam Chomsky's prognostication wrong about it. It doesn't make him morally or ethically wrong. He's just going on the information he had at the time, which turned out to be bullshit. I would argue, this is Noam Chomsky's yellow cake moment. This is the defensive version of yellow cake. That he's sitting there looking at something and saying, at a country that really does have weapons of mass destruction, saying I have physical proof they have none. It doesn't mean that he means ill will in any of this. It doesn't mean that he's like not coming from his kind of standardized moral thought form, which he very well may. It means that he's going on limited information, and Jimmy is playing this clip like it fucking has any meaning right now, considering what Russia has done in the last 3 fucking months.
Quite apart from historical interests, which go way back.
Yes, historical interests that have almost no meaning once you enter the technological age. None.
The origins of the Russian Empire, in fact.
The origins of the Russian Empire. So I guess the origins of the United States are a royal monarchy colonizing a discovered country. So we have strategic right to either the UK has strategic rights to our land now, or we have strategic ownership of the UK then? Because this ancient fucking history.
You can give arguments against Russian interference in eastern Ukraine after the coup that took place there, but it's a complicated story, and the West.
Okay, he's calling it a coup. He's not saying a U.S.-backed coup. Jimmy will jump to that. So we're assuming this is 2015?
Is not without its significant initiatives there.
So there you go.
No, there you don't go. What the fuck does that have to do with now? While you're at it, why don't you just talk to me about how to sign into your iPhone using version 1?
That's what's going on there. And the NATO only exists so we can
protect shipping lanes and fuel as it travels through the oceans so that other countries don't have to worry about that part, and piracy isn't a regular part of the NATO countries' energy exchange system so their fucking people don't die. Also, Russia can't be trusted, and nobody believed it, that they could.
Secure energy transfers around the world,
which is how the lights are on in Jimmy's garage in his $1.4 million home. It's how the asphalt in front of his $1.4 million home is made. It's how the I don't know, he gasses up his old Mercedes, whatever, that runs on, diesel that he has.
It's exactly what this is about. This is about the United States. The first thing they did was they made the pipeline called Nord Stream 2, which comes directly from Russia to Germany. They made them stop. Why? So the United States could now fulfill Europe's liquefied natural gas. We want bigger part of that market. Russia now gives 40% of the energy to Europe.
We don't want that market. It's a fucking pain in the ass. That's not going to be a permanent exchange. Qatar is involved in this as well. We talked Qatar into delivering more LNG to Germany to siphon off this part of it. We don't want these assholes invading sovereign countries and murdering civilians. We're supplying this so they're not tied to Russia. It's the other way around. Russia was using the spigot of Nord Stream 2 as a control point for Germany to try and drive a wedge between them and the rest of NATO, as Germany is the biggest country in NATO.
We want part of that. And so that's, of course.
No, we don't. We have plenty of it for our own use, and we have plenty of markets out there to sell to. We don't need to fucking take our an LNG. Gas is exactly what it is. It's gas. It comes out of the ground. It's not like the gas you get at the fucking pump. It is a gas. And it has to be liquefied, which is a big processing deal. It's a pain in the ass. And you have to process it into that. Then you've got to travel it to these other countries. And then they have to turn that LNG back into a gas. Shipping that via boats and all that kind of stuff is nearly impossible and would create the entire restructuring of the German system. They could have a gas pipeline, regular gas, using American companies and all that shit if it just came out of Ukraine. We don't need that for that. Russia knows this. That's why they're trying to seize these grounds.
Of course, what this is about, among other things.
Among other things. Yeah, our promotion of neo-Nazis, because we're pro-neo-Nazi now. America is we're Captain Nazi.
I just want to point this out, that Turkey will not say yes to NATO membership for Sweden and Finland.
Right. And so Jimmy is firmly in the Erdogan Trump camp. How does that happen? How does Jimmy just kind of go, yeah, Turkey's awesome. Let me find a... This is the side that Jimmy is on right now. Just for the record. He's using Erdogan and Turkey's actions about NATO that are pro-Russian to somehow make his point that that Russia's in the right.
So why is that, you think, Aaron? Why do you think Turkey's against it?
Well, Turkey tried to maintain a relationship with Russia, even though it's contradictory. They're on opposite sides in Syria. Turkey supplied weapons to Ukraine, so I don't know exactly what is driving this decision, but also Erdogan's very erratic. So I wouldn't be surprised if he turns around and supports these countries joining.
Okay. Does he do any of the fucking reading beforehand? Does Jimmy inform himself on any of these topics before he's yelling about them?
NATO. But look, Chomsky made a great point there. So, NATO is not just there to encroach on Russia and to...
It's not there to encroach on Russia at all. It's a bulwark against Russian encroachment.
Justify military expenditures. It's also an offensive military alliance.
No, it isn't.
Ask the people of Libya. And so people inside Finland and Sweden ought to consider that. Do they want to send their kids off to go fight in regime change wars like the next Libya? Do they want to help turn countries?
Yeah, you didn't have to do that. You could vote on being that. They weren't attacked.
like Libya was, into slave states. I mean, that's really what they're signing up for under the...
Yeah, they're pro. So Sweden and Finland are joining a pro-Nazi, pro-slavery organization. That's the
belief that they're defending themselves from Russia. What they're actually doing is integrating themselves into a hostile military alliance led by the U.S., and that could entangle them in all sorts of dangerous things, as NATO's own recent record shows.
So here's the celebrated journalist Lyra Gonzalo. He says, no, there will probably be no war over Finland and Sweden joining NATO, but both countries will get cut off from Russia food and energy, further sinking all of Europe.
Yeah, no. Sweden is not going to be sunk by not getting oil and gas from Russia. Neither is Finland. These are developed countries. They have options.
Understand, Europe is committing economic and geopolitical suicide. European prosperity is gone forever.
Yeah, that's lunacy. Why is this? Why in the world does this fucker think that that's a supportive point?
What do you agree with that assessment?
I mean, I wouldn't be so declarative, but I think that's a very real threat. Absolutely.
No, it isn't. I wouldn't be so declarative. It's bullshit.
These countries, especially Germany, are sabotaging their own economies to essentially follow U.S. orders. It makes sense. Russia is right there, whether you like it or not. Russia is a part of Europe, and Russia's energy...
No, it isn't. Russia doesn't view themselves as a part of Europe. Part of the problem they have with Ukraine, especially in 2014, was that Ukraine was trying to be part of Europe. They view themselves as antithetical to Europe.
He has powered so much of...
Do these motherfuckers read anything? Anything?
Europe. And now...
Other than what they type themselves, I suppose.
Want to just cut it off? Why? So the U.S. doesn't look embarrassed by pledging to keep Ukraine neutral? Because again, that was Russia's core demand. Just say the words that Ukraine will be neutral.
No. Deny them NATO membership if they want to join. And in 1997, Russia signed on to the founding act that allows any country, including Ukraine, to join NATO if it wants to. With no hemming and hawing, no problem whatsoever. Russia agreed to this in 1997, 2 years before Vladimir Putin took office, and I'm sure he was grinding his fucking teeth about it. Ukraine can be in NATO and be neutral. You're forcing them into Sweden's position and Finland's position while attacking them. And the minute they were attacked, the other neutral countries were like, neutrality's fucking stupid if Russia's going to attack us all the time. This is fucking childish.
Ukraine can still join the European Union, but in terms of a military alliance, Ukraine will be neutral. Just as we would ask if China was trying to bring Mexico into a China-led military alliance, the U.S. would demand and use weapons to ensure that Mexico stays neutral.
No, we wouldn't. We would use economic pressure.
So
otherwise, it would have happened a long time ago. We already have an economic alliance with Mexico.
Russia was demanding was pretty reasonable. We've played the clip before where Zelensky even admitted that he was told that Ukraine wasn't going to join NATO anyway, but that publicly the door will be left open, essentially to bait Russia. So for the mission of baiting Russia, you want to sabotage your own well-being? It's madness.
No, madness is leaving, knowing that your neighbor is a serial killer. They scream at you from their porch that they're not going to kill you and leaving your doors open at night.
I agree.
You agree.
All right. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, a complete, a hot steaming pile of blather that has no impact on the reality of the circumstance whatsoever, and a infantile, narcissistic stew of gibberish that he is spoon-feeding into the mouths of whoever the fuck watches that garbage.
NATO is continuing to expand all the...
No, they're not. Countries are continuing to join NATO because of the Russian threat. You can't say NATO is expanding because other countries want to join. If they have every right to join, they have the right to join. NATO is not pressuring them into it. They're not saying, we're not going to, Finland, you're going to be fucked if you don't join. We're going to leave you hanging. They chose to join.
They can. I make jokes about it because that's what I do for a living.
No, you don't. Let me hear one of the jokes, though. We're going to hear jokes. By the way, I am telling jokes this weekend, real jokes, ones that everyone can laugh at and enjoy at the Laugh Factory in San Diego. Please come down and join me. Say hi. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday, 1 show Sunday, I think.
But it's really, I mean, if
yeah, it's a good joke. So far, I like the setup.
I remember 35, 40 years ago, Sting did a song when we were in a Cold War with Russia, and he said, if the Russian people love their children too, maybe you guys will want peace and stop this nuclear arms race. And it was a very popular song. I don't know if it went to #1, but I bet you it was in the top 10. And it was, if the Russians love their children too. And here we are in a much, much, much more perilous situation, because
no,
it seems like the people who are pushing this are complete puppets. Like Joe Biden isn't making any decisions about
we're going full Fox Newsmax now.
Any of this stuff. Joe Biden is being told what to do
by the Pentaveret,
by his handlers that work directly for the military-industrial complex.
I see. His handlers apparently work for the British armor entity, whatever. But what's BAE? Fuck. How do their? Let's see. Hold on. BAE Weapons Company. BAE Systems. Ba-da-ba-bow. Let's see. Weapons and munitions. Here you go. BAE Systems. The British-based system, they've obviously got offices in the United States. We provide a wide range of munitions, explosive gun systems, and artillery systems. These are the guys making the stuff that you're seeing over there. There you go. Electromagnetic railgun, fused munitions, hypervelocity projectile. These are the ones that they're firing out of what's it called? Not why I'm blitzing on it. The howitzers. Vertical launching systems, adaptable deck launchers. That's what these guys make. There it is. The lightweight towed 150 millimeter howitzer, the M777. That's a British company working with U.S. contractors to refine stuff, and then this is the hypervelocity projectile that they put in there. But just call it a U.S. company.
So he's not making any decisions. So
yes, he is.
Seems like the people who are doing that are.
One of the reasons why it matters that Joe Biden is in office is because he's been there long enough to have heard this bullshit before. It's why we got out of Afghanistan, which Jimmy still thinks apparently we didn't do or shouldn't have done somehow. Biden's never going to get credit for ending that shit. Ever. They keep using the phrase forever wars as Biden shuts these fucking things down.
Are actual.
Thank you, British Aerospace Enterprises. Yes.
Fucking maniacs, and Joe Biden's just demented puppet, and so that's why, like before, Barack Obama actually was sane. He had his faculties. He was of sound mind, and he stopped arms shipments to Ukraine because
you campaigned against him.
He didn't want to ramp up a war with Russia because even though he's both.
By the way, no, that's not why. These motherfuckers. Yanukovych was president. He was a Russian sock puppet. They weren't the same fucking people. All right. Is the United States the same country if Jefferson or Jackson is president? Is it the same country if Trump or Obama is president? Or George H.W. Bush or George W. Bush, for that matter? Does the direction of the country tilt at all depending on who's president? Of course it fucking does. But this asshole wants to act like Zelensky's been president since 2012 or some shit. He got elected in 2019.
He wasn't as big as a maniac as the people he was beholden to. Joe Biden has got no faculty to stop any of this. So,
no, he just is actually operating a strategic alliance with a bunch of other countries.
So now you're seeing what happens if the head of Raytheon was running our foreign policy. That's exactly what's happening right now. There's no middleman. And
again, Raytheon is the name that they use because it sounds really good. BAE is one of the primary weapons contractors for the stuff that's actually there. We're not using like the high order Raytheon kind of shit. If anything, hold on one second. What Raytheon contributes, let's see what we do. Let's go. Okay, there to go. So here's he keeps using Raytheon all the time. Now this is their website, so take it with a grain of salt. Okay, our company, Social Impact News, Careers, Investors. So you can join. You want to? They're always hiring. In these, Raytheon they have Collins Aerospace, Pratt and Whitney, Raytheon Intelligence and Space, and Raytheon Missiles and Defense. So they do a bunch of shit. One of the things that they were working on is, say, the Mars rover. They do a lot of shit for just like airplanes and stuff. Like they're an aerospace company. Amongst that, though, let's look at their missile stuff. So Raytheon Missile and Defense. Why shit talk Raytheon so much? Raytheon Missiles and Defense wins $651 million Spy 6 radar contract. Radar, there you go. Clearly a defensive kind of weapon. U.S. Navy will outfit every surface ship in its fleet with new radars. Okay, that's these things right here that can spot stuff coming in. Naval warfare technology. So that's their missiles, and then here you go. Boink. We'll look at these. Let's see what we do from sensors to command and control systems to precision weapons. Raytheon Missiles Defense delivers innovation at the speed of relevance to protect U.S. and allied ships and sailors around the world. Advanced strike weapons, command and control, and sensors. This is what they do. Okay, so let's look at their advanced strike weapons, because Jimmy's not going to give a fuck about the defensive stuff or any of the radar stuff, any of that stuff. So they do the SM-6, the Tomahawk cruise missile, the Naval Strike Missile, the Sidewinder missile. These are decoys. It's like countermeasures that come off there. The Joint Standoff Weapon, and currently, insofar as anybody knows, none of these are at play in Ukraine at all. None of these are being used. These are all U.S. based. They're not, and we have no intention of getting our ships and our stuff involved in this fight. So if anything, Raytheon is sidelined in this kind of conflict, more so than they might be if we went into someplace like Syria or Yemen or some shit like that, which I think should be indicative of the decisions that are being made. And again, you're going to hear this about, like, feel what you feel about defense contractors, but at least be consistent in who you're talking to. Again, BAE is the primary supplier for what would be used over there. Hold on. Here's your land warfare stuff. Let's look at these. So they've got here we go. Linux infantry fighting vehicles. Those aren't going over there. Sensors. Some of that stuff might end up in there. Here's the precision weapons. This is the tow weapon system. The Javelin missile that's what's getting over there. That's these things. That's it. Stingers and they're not using the Excalibur over there. They're using some Stinger missiles on some Stinger systems, but I don't think so. They're using MLAWs or whatever. The Javelin's the only thing of theirs that's at use in any major way, and this other projectile that you can put in the howitzer that BAE puts up. This is not the one we're sending over there. That's the projectile that goes in it. Excalibur S training. Yeah, the engine course, the Excalibur 5 munition. Yeah, that would be the guided missile, so that it only hits what it's supposed to be. Instead of dumb missiles, which just fly into school buildings and shit, you just fire, at stuff targeted by a drone. So this is Raytheon. There's like two major pieces over there. They're not getting super fucking rich from this. They're getting, they make their money with like the giant radar system that they just got the contract for.
Anymore. Joe Biden is not doing anything.
Okay, well, I'm glad he's innocent. So I hope you vote for him again if he's up against Donald Trump, who got rid of the rules of engagement that Obama put in place during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that resulted in an 80% rise in civilian deaths in the first year of Trump's year in office in regard to drone strikes, and more people were killed, more civilians were killed in drone strikes during the Trump first year in office than all 8 years of Obama, which included a big chunk of the height of the Afghan war.
Isn't that amazing, Aaron, that we can sit here, you and I both know our president is far gone demented. We know he's not making any of these decisions.
No, you don't. You're assuming he is because you watch selective clips from Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson.
Who do you think really is making the decisions? Certainly isn't Kamala Harris. This is not a Dick Cheney situation.
This is a neocon foreign policy, and Biden surrounded himself by neocons. Blinken, the Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan. These are the people who played a big role in the dirty war in Syria. It was
the dirty war in Syria. And by the way, there was nothing dirty about the Russians leveling Aleppo.
Jake Sullivan, who's supposedly
they had to, because Aleppo was going to join NATO and it was full of Nazis.
Now in charge of our national security, who wrote to Hillary Clinton 10 years ago.
Also, for the record, if you want to, technically, according to Aaron and Jimmy, just having 27 neo-Nazis in your country that might be aligned with the military in any way, even as a volunteer force in one section of the country, is an excuse for Russia to level that country through an act of denazification. So technically speaking, I think according to the Jimmy Dore doctrine or the Aaron Mate doctrine, whichever it is, we have every right to bomb Syria out of existence, I guess. Because they got fucking Hitler stamps for sale in downtown Damascus. We're gonna be okay with that. Oh, how about Yemen? How about that's the whole thing? Like, we don't have any right. What about this, Jimmy? This is this is in 2014. This is video started April of 2021. Oh no! There. Yeah, so these people are yelling, "Death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews." That's what they're yelling about right there while they're doing Nazi salutes, for the record. So according to Jimmy, it's completely excusable. If the United States wants to just bomb the shit out of Yemen and send in Chechen soldiers that we round up to attack the women there, that's totally fine.
Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria.
Yeah.
So these are the minds that we are dealing with. People who would rather side with Al-Qaeda
than ISIS.
If it means overthrowing governments that are a curb on U.S. hegemony or are not.
Yes, that's how I would define Assad's regime. They're a curb on our hegemony.
Not under the.
Who's a curb on Russia's hegemony? Anybody? Does anybody get to curb Russia or China's hegemony? Or do they just get their own hegemony? Or do we just like saying hegemony?
The U.S. umbrella. That's how devoted these people are to hegemony. And
thanks for saying hegemony again. It's a cute word.
That's who's running our policy. And I agree with you. It's very scary. You know, you mentioned the 80s when Sting wrote that song. Millions of people went out to Central Park, protested. And those protests helped get us the nuclear arms control treaties that Trump killed and that Biden is doing nothing to revive. And he's
nothing to revive. Fucko, we're currently in an adversarial stance with Russia. They've left all negotiations with everyone because the world is against their murder of Ukrainians. Yeah, why aren't we in a denuclearization treaty with them? Could it possibly be that the Russians aren't negotiating with anyone right now because they're in the middle of a genocide, or because we know their missiles don't work for shit anyways?
Only doing what he's doing is ramping up tensions that will allow those nuclear.
And again, what do you mean he's ramping up tensions? Russia fucking attacked Ukraine. Will there ever be any guilt on the part of Vladimir Putin in either of these assholes' minds? Or is America's just to blame for anybody that does anything? Basically, we're this close to them saying that Vladimir Putin was an MK Ultra victim.
Weapons to be used. It's a freaky time.
Everybody check out Aaron Mate on his show Pushback at the Gray Zone's YouTube channel. Also, check out his writing at his Substack, mate.substack.com. I'm a subscriber. I get emails all the time. All right.
And he doesn't read any of it, apparently, because, he's not going to learn anything from it, but at least he would know what Aaron's going to say before he says it.
Aaron Mate, thank you very much for coming on and lending your expertise. I appreciate your anti-war journalism.
He's not anti-war. If he was anti-war, he would be decrying Russia's actions right now. Russia started this war, and he will not say anything about Russia's culpability or responsibility in this situation at all. If you were anti-war, you would absolutely lead off everything you're saying. For all the problems I have with Russell Brand, after the attack, at least he fell back and went, "What's going on? What the Russians are doing in Ukraine is terrible. However," and then he fucking folds it back, on itself. But at least he goes through the fucking motions. These two assholes don't even go through the motions. It is America's fault that Vladimir Putin decided to murder tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, even though he's failing miserably. And they seem to be pissed, just like Kudlow was yesterday, that he's being unsuccessful.
I appreciate you, JD. Good to see you.
Hey, I'm
JD. Ugh. You're watching, hold on. You're watching House Sparks Mega Worldwide, and I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. Thanks so much for the support. Appreciate it. Spartan, thanks for subscribing. Spartan Evan, super dude. Twist of the Day, thank you for gifting a sub tier to Bad Rhymer. I think you're probably a better rhymer than you think you are. Catbird, thank you for the bits. Mr. Howley, thank you for subscribing. Kath, thank you. Let's see. Go America, Slava Ukraine from Robin. Thank you so much for the super chat. Laura super chatted Canadian $5, no college degree here, but WTF NATO BS. Seriously. Robert, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it. Leslie, of course, if it doesn't bore us, it's the reason we watch you. Like you said, no one else is talking about it. Love and hugs from KC. Thank you, Leslie. Kendo, thank you for the gift subs. Jerry, thank you for the super chat as well. Melissa, thanks for subscribing. Benny Loco, thank you again. Same day as yesterday with an extra helping. I appreciate that. And by the way, don't forget to give a thumbs up, in honor of Benny Loco. Thumbs up the show. Help us spread it around. And then if you're a troll, we really appreciate you prattling away and typing stuff up. As long as you don't use any racial epithets or anti-gay language or any of that kind of stuff, you can. If you have a bigger vocabulary than your run-of-the-mill, maggot, just try and use different words that aren't directly evil. To say you're garbage, because it helps us out with the algorithm. I don't know if you know this, but it doesn't matter if you like me or not when you're watching. It doesn't matter if what you type is pro the show or anti the show. It doesn't matter. No women, no kids. That's the rule, Brooks Murray. Absolutely. No women, no kids. It doesn't matter what you write, just as long as you write something, because it tells the algorithm, boy, that fella's engaging. So, how today's your 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day anniversary. Fantastic, Dazzle. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I agree the 80s rocked. Hi. Yes, we love you. We love you, trolls as well. And who was that? Hold on. One just went by. Julie, thank you so much. Hal, so glad to meet you in Jackpot. Oh, hi, that Julie. Hi, Julie. Really appreciate your kindness and getting all teary-eyed with me. You're awesome. Yeah, so Julie and I met at the Nerd Halen show in Jackpot. and we both got a little misty. That was really lovely. It really was, Julie. It's so nice. Are there trolls? There were a couple earlier. Somebody doing the whataboutism, like this, that the shit we did under Bush, that I and many people like me and many people who watch the show protested, is the fucking same as what's going on in Ukraine right now. Or that we shouldn't help the people of Ukraine because George W. Bush, who I didn't vote for and protested against, did some awful. Fuck you. No. Like, again, it's sort of adorable, I guess, that they try that. I mean, it's straight up, Wu Mao army. It's straight up like 50 centers, like the Chinese online trolls that come in and tell you, how dare you say anything about the Uyghur genocide when America had slavery, that kind of stuff. Both Bushes sucked. Agreed. But again, if you had to vote between old Bush and young Bush, with the same vice presidents, and you had to make a lesser of two evils choice, you're going to choose HW every fucking time. And then you're going to go, why the fuck are these my choices? Oh, right, because Jimmy Dore did everything he could to destroy the Democratic Party.